Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Howdy Partner, Season 5, Episode 41. Today we are joined by some exciting partners in the form of Adam and Jessica from a very exciting company called Inflectra. We also have Zohaib, a very genius AI solution architect, and Sofi, who is one of the most funnest and interesting partner development manager that we have here in our team. Let's
Also
have a
very genius.
Yes.
What
that's
an
great.
introduction, Bhavye. Thank you.
That's what I do.
And
Let's
so I'm Adam Sandman. I'm excited to be on the show today. Thanks so much for having me and Jessica on the show. Inflectra is a company I started 18 years ago in my bedroom rather than in a garage. So it's like, again, the usual, slightly variant on the usual startup story. A little desk in my bedroom with some CDs and a computer and started coding and away we went and built a company that now has customers all over the world. And we really help customers improve the quality of their software delivery. That was our mission when we started, and that's what we do today. And I'd like to have Jessica talk more about our partnership with AWS.
Sure. So my name is Jessica Moore. I'm the Director of Global Alliances and the AWS Alliance Lead with Inflectra. We're thrilled to be here today. Thank you very much for hosting us. I've been with Inflectra for almost 6 years. In that time, we've been building our partner program. And we've got some great partners that we work with, but one of the ones we're most excited about is to be really diving in with AWS now. I think we're getting a lot of great traction. I think we have a lot to offer customers that work with AWS. So we're thrilled to be here today.
Excellent.
Yeah. So thanks for joining, Adam. I know we've been trying to schedule something on the calendar for a long time, and but this is the right appropriate time to do it. With reInvent around the corner, and you also announced a very interesting project with Amazon Bedrock, which everyone here is very excited to hear about. I see we have over 50 people live. So do you want to take it away and start with your presentation?
Absolutely, and I will be in reInvent. So if anyone on this call or on the recording is coming to reInvent, hope you are. Please feel free to DM me on LinkedIn, Adam Sandman. There aren't too many. Look for the vest and the shirt. That's you'll see me all over LinkedIn. Happy to meet up with people in person in reInvent as well. It'd be great to get coffee or a drink or something. Yeah, so it'd be great to present. So I'm just gonna go share screen, and hopefully this will all work. And can you see? Oopsie, let's go to the beginning. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah,
We will in a couple seconds.
Okay.
it's
There's
loading.
no better time to test these than in
In
live.
production, test in
Yeah.
production.
The production is the best dev environment, in my opinion.
Right. Oh, hold on a
Everything.
minute. There we go. What we had to do entire screen. And there we go. Do you see it now?
Yeah, we see it.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. So let me go into slideshow. And so today we're going to be talking about the intersection of AI and project management. And if you have any questions during the demo, or if anyone writes comments, just let me know. When I'm presenting, it's a little hard to see all that. So I'm happy to stop what I'm doing and answer a question. So if we're getting stuff coming in live from the live stream, just if one of you can read the question out to me, I'm happy to do that. That way it makes it really personal for everyone who's listening today. And if you're on the recording, well, sorry. So first of all, about Inflectra, who are we and what's our superpower? Well, what we are about as a company, as I mentioned at the intro, is we're really about quality. And when we talk about quality, people always say, well, why is that important? Why is quality such an important thing when we're talking about software and systems? What we see as our mission is we want to make sure there's never a single point of failure, because when that happens, bad things happen. I mean, if you look at software is eating the world, as they said famously. Every major application is being used to support the way civilization operates. So, when you turn on the electricity, it's a power company that's doing that. There's a energy company that has to deliver that power. There's software all over the power plants, the distribution network. When you're driving in your car and you're using the features for self-driving or assisted driving, the software that makes that happen, the traffic lights, all of the controls when you're flying a plane. There's obviously been problems in the news about certain systems failing on planes. Anytime there's a failure in software, there can be massive real-world applications. Even on the business application side, if you're not building a real-time application, there's been a major problem applying for student loans. I believe someone on this call has been struggling with the FAFSA application. I mean, that has the potential to impact people's lives in such a negative way. Or if a trading platform goes down for 5 seconds, you could be fined billions of dollars by the SEC. So we have to admit our civilization has become dependent on software. I mean, my mother will always text me when things happen, like I can't get the parking meters to work with the QR code, or I can't book a flight, or you know, or unfortunately the CrowdStrike thing. I mean, software is at the point where when software fails, it isn't just a website that you can't buy something on a platform, an unnamed platform. It's actually things that we rely on for our daily lives not working. Television, communications, 911 services. So software is super important to civilization as a whole in a way that it never has been in our history. And yet software is increasingly so complicated that it's very hard to test. So as a company, what we're really here for is we want to help you, whether you're the developer of software, so you're a CTO or a VP, and you're building a product, we want you to deliver high quality software. We want you to do it as fast as you can, but reduce the risk. And those are kind of the three aspects, right? Quality, speed, and risk. If we can get that, so that's in the right sweet spot, then then you're going to do well. When there's fall out of balance, when we deliver things fast, but they don't work well, then we have a major problem. Or similarly, you can deliver something with high quality, but if it's a year late, probably a competitor is going to be used instead. So you have to always balance these imperatives and do it in the right way. And so as a company, we're really here to help you do that. And that's our mission.
Yeah. We don't
Um,
talk about the CrowdStrike incident here.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, we don't. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. I mean, and not to pick on them. I mean, every vendor, we're a software vendor too. It's, the software is going to fail, and it's how you recover from it, how you plan from it, how you learn from it. That software is a weak point in our civilization, and we just have to be better, increasingly better as professionals. And we as a company are by no means perfect. So I definitely want to, it's a teachable moment. All these things are. We try and learn from that. So talking about some of the metrics of what we see is only 16% of software projects are actually completed on time and within budget. So 84% are not, which is actually a startling number. And if you look at some of these other metrics, I'm not going to go through all these, but these are some of the metrics when we talk to customers. These are things they care about. What percentage of their budget is being spent on unplanned firefighting instead of actually delivering value to customers? What percentage of their projects failed because the requirements were wrong at the beginning? And then how many of those are actually doing automated testing right now? 5%. And yet we know that, as we're going to talk later, testing is often the weak point. So customers and companies are really struggling to deliver high quality. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just the people who build the software, it's the people who deploy it. If you're the hospital manager and you're deploying ERP systems, medical systems, pharmaceutical products that deliver drugs and things in a hospital, you've got a lot of complex IT that other people are building, and you have to make sure it all works together. So it doesn't matter if you're a builder of software or an enterprise user of software, you have to make sure it all works. And as you see here from the metrics, we're not necessarily doing a particularly good job as an industry. We're maybe getting better, but it's always been a struggle. And as a company at Inflectra, we want to give you the tools to make this easier and less painful, cheaper, and faster. Just to give those who are not aware of the company, we've been around for 18 years. We've got customers in almost every industry. Our customers tend to skew towards what we call the regulated industries or high assurance industries. So our ideal customer is someone that's got a mission critical application, like running everything from insurance, which is mission critical, banking, guaranteeing that people can access their accounts, or the more traditional sort of mission critical industries like energy, solar farms, telecommunication networks, aviation, defense systems, life sciences, drug systems, clinical trials, MRI machines. I mean, our client base really spans the gamut of different industries, but the key factor is if you look at these client names, these are people who software has to work day after day reliably. If not, there's real world implications. So these are some of the customers that we see as our kind of marquee customers.
So,
Oh yeah,
would you
please.
say, Adam, like looking at these industries that you're representing, energy, financial, these are what we would call as critical infrastructure. So, would you say like most of your clients are folks who run critical infrastructure in the?
Yeah, I would say that other people who run critical infrastructure or they're companies that make software for them. So it could be someone who is a telecommunication company like Telstra, or a energy company like the solar company, or it could be someone who's building a system that's being used. It could be a ERP system that's being used in one of those companies, or actuator control system that's being used to control, a plant. So it could be the maker of the software, or it could be the enterprise IT user that's deploying it. So it's both of those two, but it's people who have mission critical applications for sure and critical infrastructure.
One quick question that I had, I noticed some big names here, EY and Siemens, as well as USDM. Will
Yeah.
you be able to speak briefly on any regulations and controls that you're able to, or compliance controls that you have to follow? Because I'm assuming that's a lot of A, financial, and B, the HIPAA related regulations. Will you be able to speak
Yes.
on that briefly, at
I
least?
can. Yeah, I've got a slide on life sciences, and USDM
Okay.
is a client of ours that we work with a lot. And in fact, we have just we're in the process of being validated for the AWS life science competency. We have a review, I think, a week after when we come back from reInvent with an essay at AWS because it is such a critical industry for us. And as you said, HIPAA and 21 Part 11 and other really key requirements that we have to meet. So I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to that slide. But you're absolutely right. And
Sounds
and I will
good.
mention the banking and finance. People often look at me and say, "Well, that's not mission critical," but it actually is. I mean, they're highly regulated. If you miss a trade, or if you can't close books, if you can't run payroll because your bank is down, I mean, for example, without mentioning company names, there was a set of banks that failed last year because of some issues, and there was a run because people were unsure if they could run payroll that day, and that means a lot of small businesses would have not made payroll, and all the knock-on effects on the economy. So banking and finance and insurance are in fact mission critical, despite the fact that we often think of them as just business systems. Some parts of them really are critical for the economy and the world. So
I'd argue in the finance sector, it's very much a domino that's borderline invisible. One little thing happens and that thing can spiral away. '06 to '08, that one in general. It did, maybe they're not the best example because that wasn't the smallest domino in the world. But okay, let's say the dot-com bubble, that one was pretty small when it started in '98.
right.
But especially in that one where we have such strict regulation, like very strict regulations, especially in the financial sector. It's so that we can catch those extremely small dominoes before they even form, because those spiral out of control and very directly litigation-based issues.
Right. Lawsuits and regulators, yeah. And I was working at a company, Sapient. You may know them during the dot-com boom and on the dot-com bust. So I saw that unfortunately firsthand. That was a crazy time when your entire client base goes out of business within a month. Yeah,
Is
that
that
was nuts.
Publicis Sapient? Is that the same as Publicis?
Yes, yeah, it was the Sapient Corporation that it was acquired by Publicis, but this is before the Publicis acquisition. I worked in their Boston office, LA office, and then DC, and that was where I was working when I actually got the inspiration for building the company, because we were struggling at Sapient with good quality software tools for testing, and I was like, I hate testing, and I really wish we had better tools. Why aren't there better tools that we could afford to use? And then I went, let me start a company that does that. So that was kind of the inspiration. So I owe that to Sapient, and Sapient is a great company. I will say, I learned so much from them.
Speaking of healthcare, there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to address it right now,
Yeah, feel
but
free. No worries.
schizophrenic web developer asks, "Is Inflectra a Pfizer drug brand?" Care to address this?
That's a great question. So the company Inflectra is our company brand, and we got the trademark first. And then many years ago, a company called Hospira patented it's a Remicade clone drug and called it Inflectra. And we had our patent attorneys talk to them. And unfortunately, because we're not in the same business, we're in IT, they're in pharma. You can have the same name of a product that's a different industry. So when we were not able to prevent them using that name, so we did tell them that we had the name, we're using it. We have inflectra.com. That's our domain. If you want to use it, go ahead, and they did. But yeah, so that's the reason why you might see that. But there's no affiliation with us whatsoever.
Right. So inflector.com. All right. I'll put
Correct.
that in the chat for
No
schizophrenic.
worries. It does come
Thank
up a
you.
lot. We unfortunately get nurses calling us, asking us for medications and prescriptions, and like, no, we can't answer that legally, please. And we do IT work in healthcare, so it is even more confusing. More confusing at one point is Pfizer at one point was a client, which even made it more confusing, and so was Hospira. So yeah, it's the world we live in. Moving on, if there's no other questions, I'm going to shoot into the next slide. So when we talk about what is the USP of Inflectra? What is our value proposition? At a nutshell, what we're trying to do is bridge what we call the compliance gap. So on the left hand side, or actually on the right hand side, let's start there. Most people are building software or software enabled systems, and that could be embedded systems like automotive or medical devices. It could be classic, business line of business apps, whatever it is. In both cases, we're trying to do it faster with higher quality using some degree of agile development, DevOps, continuous deployment, continuous integration, more automated testing, really moving into this high velocity, high cadence world of delivery on the right hand side. The problem is on the left hand side, we have all these things that slow us down, which are the annoying but necessary things like writing requirements, traceability. Did we deliver to the client what we said we did? Um, Audit trails, risk management, do all the security and compliance documentation, SOC 2, HIPAA, some of the things that you mentioned, ISO 27001, all the other ISO standards. And other industries like automotive have, the ASPIS standards. So depending on the industry, depending on the use case, you can deliver software, build every hour, but you might take a month to get a compliance to be able to release the software. So how do we improve that velocity, bring these together, and have the entire process run at the same cadence and the same speed? And that's what we're really all about, is improving quality and delivery and not sacrificing agility and not sacrificing compliance. We believe you can have it all. You can deliver software fast and with high quality and follow the rules and be able to demonstrate that you did everything you're supposed to.
I know a lot of AWS folks in the chat have their ears up because here, whenever we build something, and Zohaib will vouch for this as well, we have something called the AppSec review, which is the most annoying. Like you can see Zohaib holding his face right now, but it is the most like they're low key. People don't like AppSec team. Sorry if there's anyone in the chat here, but they are the most
They're doing the job.
cumbersome.
They're
They're
doing
doing
the
the
job.
job, but sometimes it comes in the way of innovation. People could argue,
Sometimes.
but it is extremely important, especially is job security is job zero, and it's part of making sure that our applications are able to meet the requirements that we set out to meet. So
Right.
double-edged
One of
sword.
the age-old things, I forgot where. So I started as a junior network administrator, I want to say like 5, 6 years ago, and the network administrator that I was working under said it is a balance between security and ease of use, and there is no such thing as the right balance. You're gonna have certain people that want it to be extra secure, but then have three-factor authentication, and they need to change their password every 16 milliseconds. And then
Right.
on the other side, you're gonna have physicians, people of important statuses putting passwords on post-it notes, complaining when you tell them to take it off. I definitely was one of those people in in school, but there is a very delicate balance that companies such as Inflectra do their best to work around and try to please as many people as possible with it. But at the end of the day, security is, in my opinion, the most step zero of any application where you need to make sure that certain things, especially if you're working in finances and healthcare, only certain things can be accessed by the right people at the appropriate time with the appropriate authentication methods or any authorization methods. And it is sometimes it can be annoying, but it absolutely is needed. And I would rather be annoyed than have certain assets be compromised.
Right. And it's not just the security; it's also the business security, if you think of it that way. Like if you're dispensing drugs because you're using a software package that tells you what the drug interactions are, if that software doesn't functionally work as corrected, it's not classic security, but you're affecting the well-being of the end patient potentially. So you have to make sure not only is something secure from a technical cyber standpoint, but is almost secure from an end user's feature. Um, does that feature have all the necessary safeguards? If you think of it that way, it's cyber is one safeguard, but now as we're moving into more of these real-time systems, there's the safeguards and AI we'll talk more about later. Safeguards across the different domains of safeguards are really important. And then friction, as you mentioned, because if you make something too hard to use, then someone's going to put things on post-it notes because they can't remember the password, and that may be less secure than having the password before. So you can have unintended consequences of certain security. So you're right, it is a balance: usability, security, compliance, safety, all of that kind of coming together. So, but as a company, we really want our platform to help that. Now as I said, we're a product. There's only so much we can do. So we do rely a lot on our service partners to actually help us do that. And our clients too, we're part of the team. So it's the client, partner, Inflectra, AWS team. Everyone is vested in doing that together because we can give you the right tools. Our partners can help you configure them the right way, but the client has to ultimately adopt and onboard and ultimately become a champion of this internally. We can definitely help, but if you're a customer, you're part of the solution too. So we want to work with you in a collaborative way. If there's any other questions, I'm going to just keep going on. And you mentioned about life sciences, so I'll talk about some of the use cases. So first of all, great timing, healthcare and life sciences. This is one of our larger industries. And some of the functionality we've got in the product, well, the first one that's really exciting and came from feedback from customers. And in fact, our entire product roadmap is from feedback from customers. But this one was electronic signatures. So in our platform, you can write requirements, you can write test cases. I'll show it to you later on how it works. But one of the challenges was if I improve everything and it's all done in the system, traditionally you'd have to print everything out on paper. You give it to the validation people, and they'd sign everything, make sure it was all signed, and you have to docu-sign it or physical sign, and they'd have filing cabinets literally as high as the wall full of all the compliance paperwork that you had to do. So even if you have a requirement in the system, you've got tests, you've got everything in the system, you have to print everything out, sign everything. So it just takes forever. The audits you have to do, they have to go through the filing cabinet, find everything. They pick a random requirement and they tell you, find the test that prove that you did this. When did you test it? Who signed it? I mean, the audits can take days and days, if not weeks and weeks. So that's the first thing is, and then the second part would be, where is the data in the system being stored? Sometimes they're using real patient data. So even though it's a software project management system, in many cases they use either real patient data, or maybe it's anonymized or synthetic, but it may be close enough that they still need to have the risk of a doctor who's testing the system, because many times they use doctors as testers, or nurses. They're not just using professional testers. A doctor by mistake might put real patient data in by mistake, not being a HIPAA expert. And so in many cases our clients say, well, we'd rather have HIPAA safeguards in place, even though it's ultimately a life cycle management system, not a medical system. Because in the end, if there's an accidental chance that PHI gets in there, let's do that. And so the Inflectra platform is validated to store PHI and PII, and we have and again, the AWS platform is also, which has been a great help for us. So what we're doing as a company is our platform lets you do all the signatures electronically. So you can write your requirements to the system, you can sign them electronically at the same speed as you're doing your regular planning and your regular sign-offs. It's all hosted with a HIPAA compliance. And then when you do all that, what you're also getting out of the box for free is all the traceability. When I show you the system, we have this end-to-end traceability from the original requirement to the test, to the task, to the code commits, to the changes that were made, to the risks. And so you can literally go into the system and pick any requirement at random, which is what an auditor will typically do, follow the train of that requirement, because they're almost like the custody of that requirement as it went through this life cycle. Here's the developers that wrote the code. Here were the tasks. Here were the commits in Git. Here were the code reviews. Here's how that code got pushed into production. Here's all the tests we did. Here's all the risks we identified. And it's all in one system. And the whole system that stores all this is validated. And what we find is, when a client uses our platform, traditionally it would take them maybe 2 to 3 days to do an FDA audit of their new release. They can do that in 2 or 3 hours. And we get audited every year by USDM. They're actually our external auditor. And we do an annual audit with them for 21 Part 11 compliance. And they tell us, when you used to use other manual methods, they would schedule the audit for 2 days. And we're like, I don't think it's going to take 2 days. And we do it in 3 hours. We did the whole thing in 3 hours that normally took 2 days. And they couldn't believe it. And they now use our platform to audit other things. So if you're using like Box or even some of the Google products, those are all audited for life science use by USDM using our platform, which is pretty cool. So that's a little bit of a USDM story there. Any questions on that?
I have one specific question based on my experience.
Okay.
So in the Southwest Houston area, there is a very large amount of pediatric orthodontists
Okay.
over here, and I do know that any sort of auditing experience, A, since it's pediatric, B, it's a very common thing. A lot of people need braces. And C, we are in an area with a higher than average normal amount of lawyers and people with law backgrounds. So auditing, at least in this particular area, is very rampant. What would be some, in your opinion, this is like not legal advice, what would be your opinion, some things for not only auditing purposes, but general security best practices for any general practitioner or medical practitioners like a pediatric orthodontist?
Right. So I mean, and I, taking my kids to dentists, and these are the people, these are the practices using these tools. This is not the developer of the system. So they're going to probably need tools, obviously, in place to manage the dental records. They're going to need, the X-ray records, the dental. They'll usually have a patient sign consent for treatment. So they're going to be dealing with a ton of PHI, and typically most of these family practices or groups of practices, they're not IT professionals. So the first thing I would say is you shouldn't be, you need to have a very good understanding of the security and have someone on your staff that knows, security rules and regulations for HIPAA. But also, you shouldn't be trying to do it yourself. You should be using as many products that are validated externally, because as the end user, in many cases, which people don't realize, is that you're still liable as the end user potentially for the software that you're using. So if you're using a software to store all the dental records, all the X-rays that were taken, make sure that you understand who's liable if, for example, that data leaks. Now you may be, you may be perfectly fine with the passwords, or your team has got security training, and obviously you still have to have a security program because even though it's a third-party system, your staff may be hygienists. They're not IT professionals, and they're probably working, lots and lots of the cleanings and brace fittings and lots of appointments. It's a busy, high tempo environment. It's so easy by mistake to perhaps lose a password or put on a post-it. So first of all, you should train the people in your organization. Second is use as many third-party systems that are HIPAA validated and complied with already, because that means you're sharing some of the responsibility with the vendor. Because again, you're not an expert. So those are two important things. And you should make sure you get copies of audit reports from these vendors. So the vendor might say, "Oh yeah, we can store PHI." Well, you need to make sure if they claim that's the case, you should probably sign what's called a BAA agreement, which is an agreement where they effectively indemnify you. And I'm not a lawyer, so this is just technical advice. A BA agreement where we have a lawyer review that, which will basically give you certainty that if there's a data leak and it wasn't your fault, if the platform had a leak rather than your staff having error, you should definitely make sure that that's covered by the agreement. Also, getting some cyber insurance, making sure that your insurance coverage is good. So if a member of staff by accident inadvertently clicked on a phishing link from a non-patient and somehow data got leaked and it was your dental practice's fault, I'll put fault in double quotes because it really, it's so easy to do, making sure that you've got that in place. And then of course, other things would be, having endpoints that are virtualized, antivirus, all the usual good security practices. But there's one other thing that's, I think, unique to any medical company or hospital or dental practice is that you have a slight disadvantage in that in most environments, you want to be updating your software as soon as possible. So like we all Windows Update runs every week for us. In the medical world, you often have to validate the systems that you're using separately, and that takes time. And so if your cloud provider is going to be updating stuff every week, in theory, you might have to test some of this stuff independently, and so that takes time. So there's always that tension between you want the software to be updated quickly to patch any security holes, but in many cases, you might be required, or your vendor might be required to update those less frequently because they've got to do independent testing. So understanding some of that's important too. That's a bit more complicated. And so I think that's the block and tackle though would be, a security program, cyber insurance, BA agreements, make sure that all the vendors you use, they've given you their security reports, their SOC 2s, their ISO 27001s, just making sure that they've got all that. And they've got a 21 part 11 report as well. They've got an FDA compliance report that says this IT system is not only secure from a general cyber standpoint, but they've got a 21 part 11 compliance certificate. We get that. So one of our clients you saw on the list was Siemens. And every year they'll say, "Where's your SOC 2 report?" And we'll say, "Here's a SOC 2 report." Then they'll say, "Okay, we need your life science FDA 21 part 11 compliance report," which is different. That covers things like traceability. Did you meet the requirements? There's a different standard there. SOC 2 is all about just, is it secure from a cyber standpoint? What they're looking for is my data, did the system have the fitness for purpose? These were your requirements. Did you actually meet them? Did you test for them? It's testing for patient harm, not just cyber. So that's why I would say if you're an orthodontist practice, making sure that all the software you're using has been tested for both patient harm, effectively, which is 21 part 11, and then sort of the cyber HIPAA side of things as well. So it's a long answer to a short question. Hopefully that was helpful.
Are you sure you're not a
It
lawyer?
was.
I think you are.
Are you gonna
Yeah,
bill us for that hour?
no, no, I
Yeah.
would like this to be useful. We do a lot of work with life science customers. So moving on to financial services, a lot of the rules coming out now are all around compliance. If you're in the news and you search for DORA, you might be not DORA the Explorer, but unfortunately, if you search for DORA, you might be thinking, "Oh, those are the agile metrics," which is the DORA scaled agile metrics. Well, no, it's not that. Unfortunately, there's a whole other DORA. DORA is the new Digital Operational Resiliency Act coming out of Europe, which is a bit like the Sarbanes-Oxley or SOX, and there's Basel III. So lots and lots of cyber and the resiliency testing requirements. These requirements coming around are not just to make sure as your financial system, banking system, core banking, insurance, claims management, all that stuff. It's not just to make sure that it actually physically works and is cyber secure. It's also making sure it doesn't have resilience. So if a billion trades went through your platform, can it cope? So for the first time ever, these rules are now requiring a resilience and risk management aspect. So one of the things that we provide as a company is not just project management, agile planning, testing, all that stuff, but we also have built-in risk management. We have built-in tools to help you do that. So our platform is designed to not only help you think about the things that are happening today, the issues, the requirements, but also how do you plan for the risks? And then using AI, which we'll show you a bit later on, how do you mitigate those risks? Well, guess what? AI is really good at some of this stuff. It's good at thinking of risks. That's always the challenge with your brainstorming is you get people in the room and you say, let's brainstorm all the risks. And they go, well, here's what could happen. Here's what could happen. But everyone's thinking about what used to happen, what happened in '06, what happened in .com. We just talked about that. But are we thinking about what hasn't happened yet that could happen? Turns out AI is quite good at that because it has much larger data sets and more, in some ways, more imagination. So risk management is a really key part, and every financial service firm has a chief risk officer, and oftentimes the chief risk officer, the CIO, are not always, they're not always thinking together. Whereas really, if you're thinking IT systems and risk management, they should be working hand in hand. And I think a lot of times they're not, and that's a big risk. And software like ours that helps to try and integrate that conversation between the risk management division, the project management, the IT, the CTO, those different groups, software should help to facilitate that conversation to make sure we do have that level of compliance and future-looking risk assessment and resiliency. There's no questions. I'm going to keep going. We do a lot of work in the industrial sector, and we've lumped these together because a lot of the same issues, automotive, industrial, and energy, basically hardware systems. So a lot of embedded real-time systems, whether it's a factory floor and an actuator, or it's a robot, baking something on an assembly line. It's a real-time driving system like a self-driving car, or energy. It could be a power plant, or it could be a solar factory, all those kinds of things. There's tons and tons of mechanical parts that are heavily IoT and very, very software heavy. And so how do you test for that? How do you define the requirements and test for it? One of the other things that you have to do by law is do what's called a failure modes effects analysis, which is called FMEA. It's basically a risk assessment, but it has a different set of criteria. And we've built that into our platform. So as you're developing the software and you're delivering the hardware, you can actually test this together. So we have some companies doing this for self-driving cars right now in Europe. Another one that's a little bit more on the healthcare side is people building defibrillators. We also have people building MRI machines. We've got people. Another sort of slightly more interesting one, I suppose, is the Swiss Army knife factory that makes all the Swiss Army knives. It's all robot based. Well, that warehouse is using our software to help manage and test and project manage all the systems being used to do that as well, Victorinox. So we have lots of interesting clients in these different sectors. But the key is, how do you test software, project manage it, make sure it's safe for use from a risk, cyber safety standpoint, as well as obviously being compliant with the laws.
You've been teasing us for too long, Adam. I think we need to see the product in action.
Okay, we're heading there. So just quickly, the other big area we do see a lot of work on the same issue is defense systems, and we do a functionality around traceability and test that traceability, and we do work with the F-35 program and some missile defense and other things. They're mostly classified, so I don't know much about them other than the name of the program, but some cool stuff. So I can take a break from the slides, go into the app, or would you want to do that? Or I'm very flexible. We have some other slides, but we can go into the app if you want to do that.
Yes, I would say let's do the app.
Let's do the app.
Yeah.
And we
All
can come
right.
to the slides, later.
Okay. No problem at all. Let me go to the right. Let me stop that and go over here and to here. So can you see the system okay?
Yes, we can.
It should be Firefox. Okay, great. Move this out the way. So there's two products I'm going to be showing. The first one is our Spira platform, and then this is the one I've been talking mostly about. There's also some automated testing, which when we come back to the slides, we can come back to that one. So this is the platform, and the first thing to think about is, what are the typical personas that will be using the product? And it crosses different teams. So first of all, within Spira, we have what we call workspaces. So at the product level, we have these items that we call products, and these are the items you see here. For example, if I was working in the aerospace industry, I might have a flight control system or a flight planning system. I might have in a space type of aerospace. I might have guidance and telemetry. And these are the kind of the embedded system examples. Whereas if I look at financial services, for those who are more familiar with line of business applications, I could have an ERP. I could have a core banking system, a T24, a billing system. I might have a web portal where I can log in as a consumer and make loans and check my balances, and maybe a mobile banking app. So these are all my systems, and they're different kinds and different types. Every one of those systems we call a product, and we have functionality for a product team to manage that product. Everything from requirements and testing, all of that. Then
Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt, but
Oh, please.
is this view like a project manager looking at all the projects in a company? Is that fair to say?
Yes. So depending on the role of the person, if I was working on one team, I would only see perhaps this one item in the navigation. I wouldn't see anything else. So it's restricted by permission. Whereas if I'm like the CIO, CTO coming in here, I would see everything. So I would see all my products, all my what we call programs, which are basically the collection of products together. And that's really important because we have a function in the system called capability management where we can actually say, well, I've got these two systems. So for example, in banking, which is easy to understand, I've got a mobile app, which is my little mobile banking app. I've got my web app that does the web banking. But the web app also has the APIs that support the mobile banking. So I want to release a brand new payment system to a customer. I want to make sure that I can deliver that. And that's going to require both teams coordinating. So we have functionality at this program level where a program manager or a solution level, a solution manager who's in charge of multiple systems, they've got views where they can manage multiple teams in an integrated fashion. Meanwhile, the scrum master, the product owner, the BAs, the developers, testers, head of QA, they're all going to be working in the different team levels what we have here. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yeah. And so it's like, role-based access control, something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And then there's also a portfolio level above that, which is like a portfolio manager. So if I'm in charge of all of the consumer products, I might have a portfolio of all my consumer programs. There might be B2B, business programs. Like if I was a bank, maybe there's consumer banking and there's business banking, and those are portfolios that have programs that then have products. So it's a three-level hierarchy, letting the large customers have the ability to really segment their teams, but then aggregate everything up to get these views that help them make important decisions around the organization. So I guess we'll start at the team level and then we can move our way up. So the functionality available at a team level, first of all, looks something like this. So this will be a dashboard at the team level for a single product. And there's three different views. But what I can see right here is we're fusing this information together. And the information comes from the different parts of the system. So on the planning side, we've got teams, BAs, requirements managers building out all the requirements for the system. They might be using the planning boards if it's an agile project to do Scrum and Kanban type planning activities. They can track all the documentation and all the releases and versions of the software they're releasing. There's the testing functionality where the testers will be to write the tests. And then on the development side, we see all the code. We link to the Git repositories, we link to the build pipelines, the commits, all of that stuff's going to be here on the dev side. And then when things fail, we'll see all the defects that get logged. We can synchronize them with tools like Jira or GitHub or GitLab. Pick your favorite tool, as well as we can manage it internally for those that don't really want to have a separate tool. And then we have the risk management module, which is fully integrated, as I'd mentioned, and the task management. So really, everything for managing a software or systems project can be done within this section at the project level. And then all that information gets fused together to give you this nice dashboard, which will cover everything from am I on time, am I on schedule? You can see here that I'm 28% done. I've got all these risks on my risk board, so I don't have any critical risks that are certain, but I do have quite a few risks that are likely. So I can click on these widgets in the dashboard. I can drill down in real time and see what's causing that. What are the risks behind that number? And then things like this down below will show you my schedule. Here are all my active releases and sprints. Are we on track? Are we behind? We're way behind because of the demo system. And so you can track the completion of work versus the time elapsed and see what's your schedule. We then have functionality to show you some important metrics, as I mentioned, around traceability. So the key metric here is really around what we call coverage. What that means is if I've got all these requirements I'm going to be delivering in the next version of my software, well, have I tested them? Can they be tested? Do I have any tests? Have we written the tests? Have they been run? Did they pass? Did they fail? Are there tests that are blocked by infrastructure failures or other tests that I can't get to? So are there basically blind alleys I can't go down yet? And really the key would be before I release this software, everything should be green. And if I see reds or yellows, but even if I see grays, that means tests we haven't run yet. Or even blues, that means these are requirements that we haven't even written the test for. We don't know how to test it yet. It's a feature that has no test, no automated test, no manual test, no scenario. How are we going to test this? We don't even know how to test it yet. So that's a huge risk on a real project. So these metrics get fused together to give basically the project level management, the project manager, the product owner, they get this view to see how is my project doing. And there's
So,
things like burn up and
so
burn
are
down
the
here.
tests written before the code is written? Is that it, Adam?
Well, that depends on your approach. So, and if you're following a test-driven development methodology or a BDD methodology, absolutely you should do that. You can write the manual test, the test scenarios beforehand. You should be doing that ideally. And in some cases, you can even write some of the technical tests ahead of time, unit tests. There's even functionality to do some of that. So it depends on the methodology, but really people are moving more and more towards your shift left testing, which means you're testing before the system is built. Because if you wait till the system is built, there's less time to course correct, and testing always is always the bottleneck, as you know.
So let's say I want to write a test. So how can Inflectra help me? Let's say I want.
Absolutely. So let's use some of the AI to do that. So one of the things we want to be showcasing is not just the functionality in the system as it was. We've released this new SpiraApp that Bob mentioned at the beginning around the generative AI. So what we're going to do is show you how you can do this in the AI way. And traditionally, I can show you a little bit how it works as well. So traditionally, what you would do is you would go into the requirements module and you would go in here and you could go into the system and say, I want to write a new requirement. So this would be a requirement that I've written. As a user, I want to be able to see all the books I've checked out, and you'd write some description here of all the requirement, and then you would hand this off to your testing team, and your testing team would go here and write some test cases, and they'd have to type out the tests and go ahead and do that. Separately, you might hand it off to your developers, and you'd write down, I think there should be a screen that does something. And then the developers will go off and code that, and then you test it. You also might want to identify the risks that go with that, and you do that right here. So that's how you would do it traditionally. Now with the
And
new
this
AI
is the project
functionality,
manager. This is the project
correct.
manager doing all of these
That's
things.
correct. Well, the team, the project manager is going to write the requirement, then hand it off to the head of QA, who's going to hand it off to his test team, and they're going to divide up the test cases, and they're going to write lots and lots of tests. So the tests will be over here in the test module like this. And so these are all the tests, and there's hundreds and hundreds of tests. So you've got people writing tests, and if you click on a test, they're going to describe what's the system going to do. System might not exist yet. The system might not even have wireframes yet. Maybe it does. So it may be a brand new system. So they're going to say, well, this is an example from booking a hotel room. So you got to build a test that we can, if we try and book a hotel in San Francisco or a city with no rooms, the system must handle that use case and handle it gracefully. And so they'll write down the steps for how that might work. So typically, that one requirement that you might have gotten for a customer, the project manager is probably going to spend an hour or two writing that, and the testing team is going to spend probably several days writing the test cases for this and other requirements that go with it. Um, and then identifying the risks that go with it and writing the tasks to break this down to a development level where I can give it to a developer to understand. You're talking, days and days of work before you even touch a line of code.
Yeah,
So, and the software makes our software definitely makes that easier because before the Spira, which is the tool, when I was back at Sapient, we were using spreadsheets for this. So traditionally, what I would do is I would get a requirements document that looked like this, and it would be Microsoft Word or Excel. And it's amazing how much Excel is still being used. I would have all these in Excel, and then maybe a Word document if it's more narrative. I would give it to the client, and the client would read it through and go, okay, yeah, I agree, this is the functionality. And then the testing team would go off and in our day, it was spreadsheets. They would write all these tests in spreadsheets. And then if we're going to automate the test, they would give them to a developer, then have to automate everything. And the developers would, there also other developers would write the code to build the application. So it was tons of documents. And if you think about audit and compliance, in an audit, what you have to do is say, well, did you test something? This is green. I see it's been tested. If I click on it, how do I know it's been tested? Go in your filing cabinet or go to your SharePoint or your OneDrive or your other place, find the documents that show that you did the testing. Well, here it's super easy. I go in here and say, here's my requirement. These are my tests. They passed. There's my development code. There's all the code. I can drill down and see the code that was reviewed. I can see the code was committed. I can see exactly what code was done to make this application work. And I can drill down even further and say, well, who ran that test? When did they run it? They ran it. Oh, they ran it on this date, and they ran this version of the system. If I click on it, depending on how much data you put in, they might have a step-by-step screenshots and evidence to show what was done. This one doesn't have any screenshots, but they often do. And so you're able to basically have all the information of your project for a project manager in one system. So it's
uh,
giving you
uh,
that traceability from a requirement to a test to the test that was run to all the evidence that goes with that. And then the defects, if there were any, will get logged and they link back. So we know exactly from the beginning to the end of the project, all the information is in one place versus it being scattered across multiple different systems.
so can you help me write? How will AI help me do this? That's what I'm interested in knowing.
Yeah, so that's the next. So I just want to say, that's the state of the art
Setting the
prior
scene.
to this, exactly.
You're setting the
So
scene.
yeah, setting the stage because AI. So what AI can do is if I go into my examples, I've done some before the demo, so make sure it works as always you do in a demo. So let's go in here and say I'm going to create a new requirement. So if you want to, you can pick one, or I just enter one as a. So for example, as a let's say I wanted to buy tickets to a concert. So as a consumer, I'll use the user story format. As a consumer, I want to book tickets for a music concert. That might be my requirement. Now, in real life, it's going to be much more lengthy than that, and that's okay. We can when we engage the AI engine, what we're doing is we're taking this name, and optionally we're taking this description if you have one, and we're going to bundle that together, and we're going to basically send that to the AI engine, and we're going to tell it with some predefined prompts. I want to build some artifacts to help me test that. So what I can do, and I guess for those who are more technical, we're right now in this demo and generally using a foundational model that we haven't done any kind of training or pre-training on. Its a foundational model hasn't been adjusted. Now, if you're doing a consumer application like this is going to give you incredibly good results as is. If you had an application that was maybe more sophisticated, or maybe it's more niche, it might be something that only your company knows about, you might want to use a trained model that's been fine-tuned on your data. So in this example, because it's a consumer feature, the AI, the large language models know a lot of information about this and are more than capable of doing it. So let's go ahead. And what I need to do now is I've got my requirement. I want to be able to generate some information. So first thing I can do is I can generate some test cases. So I'm just telling the system, I want to test this. How might I do that? So it's going to go off and it's going to do that. And it's done that. Took about 5 seconds. It's pretty fast. For those who are more technical, I'm using for this particular example, I'm using Claude, and I'm using the Claude Haiku, I think that's how you pronounce it, model, to do the test generation. So that's all I'm using. There are other models you can use as well. We've also used Llama model, and that's worked very well as well. So you can use either Llama or Claude. You may be able to use other models as well, but those are the two that we've optimized it for and done testing for ourselves. And it's generated some test cases. If I hit refresh, you'll see them right here. So it's given me some examples here of both valid test cases and invalid, which is what you do as a test manager. You're going to want to make sure the happy path works. Can I book a ticket? But also, users inevitably do things that are not the right thing. And we want to make sure we've tested that as well, so the system is safe. So what it's done here, it's generated 5 different examples. Book tickets for a valid concert. Book for a concert with an invalid date. Maybe the concert does not exist. Someone tries it and it's gone. Maybe it's sold out. Maybe you try and get tickets for -4 number of tickets, because people will try and do that or accidentally, and those are the kind of negative tests we'll do. And let's go click on one of them and have a look at it. So when you click on it, not only has it generated the test name, it's also generated the full set of sample data and steps for a tester. Now you're going to think, well, how does it know your application? Now it doesn't. It doesn't know your application. Obviously, you could fine tune the model on your application, but the application probably doesn't exist yet. This is a requirement for something that you're building, and what it's doing is it's giving you a template to build your test. So this will not be the final test, but this is probably the 90% test that you can now customize. And when we showed it to our head of testing, head of QA internally, his feedback about this functionality was, first of all, it's an amazing time saver. This would take me hours and hours to generate these 4 test cases and about 10 steps in each, and then I'd have to go through and make sure they were good. And the other thing is, when I generate these list of tests, first of all, it saved me a bunch of time. Now some of these tests I'm going to have to edit, because maybe the checkout page doesn't work the exact same way the LLM suggested it, and that's okay. So inevitably I'll have to spend maybe half an hour doing some refinements. The second thing is there may be some it generates that aren't valid. Maybe there's no way that you could have a negative quantity, though obviously you probably could if it's a text box or a picker. But let's say you decide that wasn't valid. But the other thing is, and this is often the most important thing, is what I had of QA said is that at least one of these I didn't think of, like the content does not exist. And so what we found was that the value to the project manager is, one, just time savings. People are not spending all this time writing up boilerplate. They can spend time analyzing a good first pass, a good first draft, and editing it. But the second thing is it also finds things you would have missed. Because again, it's the human AI team working together. So the human AI team is the test manager now has this superpower where instead of taking 2 days to write the test cases, meanwhile the developers are off coding, this superpowered test manager is now able to be far more efficient and spend more time looking at that example that we just showed you and going, that's a really interesting idea. Go to the confirmation page, verify the ticket, go to the checkout, tries it again. Oh, I didn't think of that. Or maybe we should change the UI of the page. Maybe maybe this is giving them some ideas they didn't even think about. So it's really good because it gives you this great starting point from which to build your tests.
One question that I'm having, maybe Zohaib can answer as the AI specialist, or maybe Adam, you can as well. I see that it's actually generating a step-by-step process for each test case.
Hmm.
So, from my experience, LLMs usually just spit out a whole bunch of text. How are you able to break that down into steps? Like that's very interesting.
I can answer that if that's okay, or is it if you so one of the things we learned, and I think the documentation helped a lot, and also some of our R&D team internally was that, and this was not true of some of the older models, but the newer models you can be very specific, and the prompt behind the scenes is the prompt I'm using, the system prompt is, you are a business analyst. Um, you are to speak only in JSON. Only give me exact JSON and nothing else, and then we can parse the JSON. And I also say, please use this JSON syntax. When you do that and you specify almost as part of the prompt, we're getting back, instead of a bunch of text, because the first version of this plugin did exactly what you said. We got a bunch of text and it was different every time. And we used a regular expression to try and convert this text. It was so unreliable, never right. So we tell it to use JSON every time, and now we get a much more machine readable answer.
You gave away the secret sauce right away. But yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sorry, I hope that. I didn't give away the secret sauce there. And some things you have to do. What I found also is when our team was looking at this, is some models are more chatty than others. Like Claude and Llama have slightly different variances, so the prompt has to be slightly tweaked. Because we found with Claude, it tended to want to say something like, here's your JSON. Like, no, I don't want that. That's going to make it unreadable by a machine. Can you just not say, here's it, just give it? So there's things like that where you have to be ultra literal for some of the models, and other models are not like that. So you have to tune it a little bit on the model you're using, but the basic prompt works across all the models. But we did do a bit of tuning for specifically for Claude and specifically for Llama. We had some code in there to check which one you were using and slightly modify the prompt to make sure we definitely got the output we needed. Otherwise you're right, it can be a bit messy to interpret. And now the other things you can do, which are kind of cool, since we're on this page, is one thing is, let's say we have a test case. So I've got this test. You wouldn't believe it, but sometimes people don't have requirements. They never got around to writing requirements. They just got some functionality, and they had a bunch of test cases in spreadsheets. The number of clients of ours that have spreadsheets and spreadsheets of test cases, and we never got around to requirements, which is a bit worrying, especially with the industries they're in. I won't mention them, won't shame them. But you can also reverse engineer requirements. You can say, well, let's take this test, and what requirements might you have for this test? I just did that. It's now reverse engineered. Let's see, it reverse engineered this one. So this is the one that I had created as a consumer. I want to book tickets for a music concert. Well, I pretend I didn't have one, and it's generated a second one, and it generated this one here, which was book tickets for a valid concert. The system should allow the user to book tickets. So it's basically able to create missing things in your project plan. So if there's missing things that, again, that would take me maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes to write, but now it takes 10 seconds. So just improving the productivity. And if it's a more complex test, can generate more complex requirements. Now, so let's go back to our requirement, though, the one I was on before. If I go back a few steps, it was this one here. The other thing the AI can do is not just write the test case, but the other thing, if you're familiar with software development and software methodologies, there's something called BDD, or behavior-driven development. It's a way where before we start writing tests, we want to think about the different scenarios we might need to develop the system for before we do them. And so we actually have a functionality to do that as well. So let me go ahead and I'm going to turn this from a feature into a use case, and that changes the type of requirement. And then when I do that, it's going to unlock this functionality where I can say, generate a scenario. What it's going to do now is, instead of generating detailed tests, which is for the testing team, the biz dev, the business analysis team, not biz dev, they're going to want to see these scenarios. And so here it gives you the human readable and machine readable, actually, Gherkin style scenarios. And many of our clients are using Gherkin, and they do this by hand. They take that one user story or requirement, and they write out these different examples of scenarios, which again would take me probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours to do this, and I could now have this done for me. And of course, I'm going to want to edit this a little bit and clean it up, but it's pretty good to start with. It includes cases like ticket cancellation, payment information, insufficient tickets, things that you maybe would or wouldn't have remembered. Like, I didn't think about this. What happens if your booking and the system goes down? Like, that's never happened. So it's these examples of things that you go, oh, that's a really good thing. I'd have forgotten that. And so the AI, and the other thing in our platform is the AI prompts are customizable in the settings. These are just the default prompts out of the box we're using today. Okay, next thing is I talked about risk at the beginning, right? We have all these risks. How do we think about risk? So in this tool, we've got this risk management module. So you can go into the risk management module over here, and you can quantify all the project risks. And we rate them by the probability and the impact, and then we can calculate what's called an exposure score. And that's how we think about risks. And we can do really cool things in here, like we can link our risks to our requirements, and we can then say, well, if I've got any time to run 10 test cases, how do I reduce the most risk in my system? And especially when we're dealing with cyber projects, a lot of we use this for our cyber program internally. So we do this by looking at all the cyber risks, all the vulnerabilities, nation state actors, you name it, password compromise, cross-site scripting. We put them all in here, and then we start to rank the impact and probability on each of our systems, and we then calculate an exposure score. But one of the challenges is identifying all those risks. That takes a lot of time and brainstorming, and inevitably we were always worried, did we miss a risk? So what you can do is you can go into this requirement, and this is booking tickets for a music concert. It's not super mission critical, but if you're Taylor Swift, it could be. If you're a Taylor Swift fan, this could be life or death. So if you go in here and you want to think about the risks, the AI can take the same requirement that we saw earlier, and it can now build out a risk matrix for you. And what it's going to do is taking that same data, and it's just going to take a few. Hopefully it works. You never know in a demo, but it's yep, all good. And there's my risks. So it came up with about 7 or 8 different risks. So let's say integration with the venue, because some of these are more generic risks for any software app, but I like this one here, integration with the venue. So let's look at this one. I'm going to control click and bring it up over here. So I've got my integration with the venue, and it's talking here about maybe because the ticketing system's got to work with the Capital One Arena in Washington D.C., the SoFi Arena in L.A., and other arenas I don't remember the names of. It's got to integrate all these different venues to make sure that when you look at that ticket, it actually locks it away, and that venue doesn't have any issues. Can't buy this ticket next to that ticket because maybe there's some reason, or it's a disabled seat or something. Whatever it is, there's all these business rules that the venue will have that you have to integrate with. So how do we mitigate that risk? So we could obviously look at this risk and we could spend some time mitigating it. But what if we have the AI think about that too? So not only can we have the system identify the risks, which again, you want a human to go through and review, and some might not be relevant, and there may be ones you want to add, but you can take any of the risks, both human and machine generated, and now it gives you some mitigations. And it's giving, and it's going to, and we, in the prompt, we actually say, please give us some technical mitigations and like process. So some things might be like, how do I how do I do the integration from a data standpoint? Other things might be stakeholder communication. So that way, even if the integration fails, in some cases, we've got a good plan in place. So we've got the prompt designed to look for different kinds of risk and different kinds of mitigation. And so the AI just generated all that live right this minute based on that one risk. And imagine I went through all those 10 risks, generated all those mitigations. That's probably 100 to 200 different data elements that I have to manually create. Here the AI has generated it for me. And this, again, the human machine team is working together, because I'll go through this and I'll maybe delete ones that don't make sense. And maybe the ones that do make sense, I might edit a little bit. And the ones I didn't think about. And then from there, I can then go into the task section, and the ones that I want, I can then turn into actionable tasks and begin to mitigate those risks with an action plan. And that goes into my project plan. Now, there's one more thing as well. If we go back to my requirement, we've talked a lot about testing. The other thing that project managers do a lot is figure out how do I actually, how do I code this, because the coding tools do a lot of that, but I want to break this up into manageable parts for my team. I've got developers, I've got database expert, data science experts, UX, UI people. How would I break this into more manageable tasks? And that's often a task that a project manager would do. So you can go into the task module, and you can use the AI to also generate tasks. So what it's doing there is it's saying, okay, let's take this requirement and let's decompose that into some different tasks for me. And I'm just going to hit the refresh button there. And now it's got me some different tasks that you might have to implement to make this one feature work. And each one comes with not just a name, but a more detailed description. So you can see here, it comes with a name in the big bold text, and there's a more detailed refinement description that was generated simultaneously as well. So I've basically built out a project plan for one requirement, a complex requirement, in probably 10 minutes on this call, and that would probably have taken me 2 days otherwise. So any questions, any comments coming in from people on this, or what are your thoughts?
I'm gonna ask one question from the stance of usually a developer in here, especially in the ML side of things.
Yeah.
Is there a way when you are creating this, let's say you're using speech to text, you're just sounding your thoughts out.
Yep.
Is there a way for this to create a template? Like, let's say instead of tickets for a concert, I want tickets for an Inflectra webinar, like something like that. where a template for a ticketing-based payment site.
Yeah, so right now what we're doing, in the terms of the AI, we're taking the literal name and description of what you've done, and we're basically sending it to the LLM to get the more detailed artifacts. In the system in general, there's functionality for having like templated test cases. You can decompose requirements into smaller ones. So there's functionality in the core system outside of the AI for reusability like that. But the AI itself, we're taking the specific instance, I guess, of a requirement like that, like the one you have here, and we're sending that. If you make a more specific requirement, then it will give you a more specific answer, subject to the data being available, obviously, in the large language model. I've actually did a
Okay.
demo. I did a demo, for example, I did a demo. I'm happy to do it now. See what happens again. I did a demo with a client where in the demo they were like, it was we do these demos all the time with customers, and they ask questions. And one of the questions was, how would I migrate from my current system to your tool? So I said, I don't know. Well, I do know actually, but I said, I'm curious. How do I migrate? Migrate my no, that's not how do I migrate. I need, as a user, this is a requirement. As a user, I need to migrate my test cases from Excel to SpiraTest, which is our test version of this tool. I'm curious, if I was to do that, let's go ahead and think about maybe the task for that. See what that comes up with. It might come up with some tasks. Let's see. Okay.
That's fingers crossed. It's not talking about bird migration.
Right. So first of all, identify the test cases in Excel, document migration process, verify the test case migration, create the test cases into the appropriate fields, and then map the details. So it wasn't super specific in this case. We actually have a migration tool, which I was wondering if it was going to come up with. Depends on if it knows about that. So depending on the model and how much access it has to the internet, and also I wasn't super specific as a requirement. So depending on the nature of the query, it may give you more or less. But it certainly gave me very valid answers. It just didn't give me a pre-built solution, but it wrote me a project plan that certainly is correct. So depending on how much it knows, it will give you, I guess, more or less definite answers or more interesting answers. The other thing you can do is change the temperature of the model. So you can go into the model definition. I should show you a little bit of the secret sauce behind the scenes. If I go into the functionality, we go in here to the settings, you can actually change the model, change the model family, change the model, change the temperature. I can change some of these settings. I can even change some of the prompts. So here's the prompts that I mentioned. So you can change some of the prompts, and that would change the behavior too. So it's quite flexible. And this is done on a per project basis, because that's really important, because if you have certain teams, like if, for example, in a financial service project, they might want to use different AI prompts than perhaps a more embedded system, or maybe you've got, especially if you're like an EY, for example, you work for multiple different clients in different industries. You may want different prompts for different. Whereas if you were a bank, maybe the prompts are good across all your teams because you are working in a single industry. So depending on the client use case, there's definitely a need. So that's what we made these settings per project rather than global in the system.
That's amazing.
So
Talk a
yeah.
bit more about your experience with using Bedrock, and how was like the integration process. I know this was also sort of in some ways a net new feature, like you had something already built on other providers, and how you.
Yeah, so it's interesting. When we first built we built an earlier version of this using ChatGPT and that model, mainly because that was just what was really easy to get going with. And then we started to look at how do we use so the problem therefore is, the first problem with that is clients liked the look of it because it did largely what you saw. It wasn't quite sophisticated. It didn't use the JSON, so it wasn't as reliable. But the first question all of our clients said was, I love the functionality, but I don't love the data governance. They said, because it looks good on a demo, but they said we can't use it because you're putting all your data into effectively OpenAI's large model. We're not, they're not a client of, we're not a client of theirs. We can't guarantee the data. And so that's where we said, okay, we need to come up with a different approach that's not just demoware, but actually something that they could use. And actually, if it's okay, I'm going to jump over back into the slides for a sec, because I have an architecture diagram, and I hope that doesn't turn people off. The architecture diagram is
While
okay.
you're looking for this, there was a question from the
Oh,
chat.
sure.
Someone said cool product, or I shouldn't say someone, Pixel Pictures, cool product. What does your customer base look like? Do you want to flash the quick slide at the beginning
Yeah, let me
of
do
the
that.
customers?
Yeah, so there's the customers, if you can see that. Can you see that okay? Make sure it's coming up okay on you.
Yes, that
Yep.
does look good.
Good,
All
cool.
right.
Yeah. So those are
Okay.
our customers. And then in terms of the way the architecture is, I don't want to spend too much time on it. We can always come back. But the key thing is what we're using is we have our AWS account that Inflectra owns, and that's where all of the Spire application lives. It's a SaaS application on the marketplace. And basically, we are able to connect to a customer AWS account where they can store the models. Now, we can also do it on our own account too, but typically clients now have the option where they want to have full control over the data, so they can connect from our AWS account over into their large language model, and that way they have data governance they can ensure the data governance is what they want. The other thing we do as a company, which is that we can host in our SaaS version in different regions. So we have many customers, like for example Siemens, you saw on the list. Well, they're hosted in Europe because they have GDPR requirements, and so we host it in Ireland, in EU West one, I think it is, and then we back it up to Frankfurt, EU Central something, I forget the number. And so they have full guarantee that their data stays in Europe. And so if they were using this exact same functionality, they can either use Bedrock hosted in our European region, or they could they could connect it to a Bedrock model hosted in their region. And the same thing with, for example, life science customers, medical customers in the US, because of HIPAA, usually have to have hosted only in the US. Data mustn't leave the US. So with these data residency rules, we're giving the customer the ability to have, first of all, they can control the data if they want, but also, regardless of whether we're controlling it or they're controlling it, they have control over where it's physically stored from a data residency and data governance. And that turns the product from basically being demoware to productware, and that's the big difference. So with Bedrock, it's literally been the foundation so that we can deliver this as a product that people can actually use. Versus before, it was great at a conference, at a booth, we could show it, but it wasn't really ready for prime time from a production capacity. Especially if you look at those clients that we saw, these are the kind of clients that, are they going to trust their data to a effectively, an open large language model? I don't think so. They're very conservative. Banks, insurance companies, medical, critical infrastructure. These are the clients that will be the most hesitant to use AI and will have the most safeguards. I mean, we're filling in forms, security questionnaires just for our core product. They now have many of them have AI like supplements you have to fill out. They're getting quite sophisticated. They want to understand, what's used to train the data, where is it being stored, who has access to it, all these quite really good questions they're asking. And so one of the things I would say that Bedrock for us was really helpful is having the first of all the models, and having that data governance and the reliability of an institutional brand of AWS has been really helpful towards the acceptance of AI. Does that help with the answer the question?
I'd say yes.
Great. Now, the other thing I do want to show, and we can do it, maybe can do it sooner if it's okay, before we go back into the deck, is the other main area which I talked about earlier on was the testing side of things. So we've gotten through this application, we took a user story, which was right here, and we turned it into these test cases, right? Let me go to that one, this consumer one here. And so these test cases, these are manual test cases. So the next major productivity problem is I've got these test cases and I have to go click through an application and do all this. Now, when the application doesn't exist, this is good because it helps me think about the test planning. But once we've got an application to test, this quickly becomes very laborious. And as you know, most people now are doing automated testing. But automated testing means I have to get developers and they have to write code. They have to write Selenium scripts, Playwright scripts, Cypress scripts. It's very code intensive. And especially if the developers are using Copilot or Amazon Q or Code Whisperer to write code, and they're doing it faster and faster, the quality of that code is deteriorating, and certainly the quantity is increasing. How does the testing team, how are they going to keep up? That's really hard. In fact, before we show these, I want to show this next piece. Let's just talk about that for a second from a slide standpoint. That the quality of code. This was a slide that we got a friend of mine from Fujitsu had found. Since ChatGPT was released, we now have more and more people using ChatGPT, and the number of page views on Stack Overflow is decreasing. So, as a developer, I'm a developer too. That's my background. I would love copying code from Stack Overflow or things that predated it, because why write a sorting routine or a conversion of this to that? This exists. It's all out there. People are using different tools to do that now, AI tools, and these tools are great, but it means I can do it much faster. Less people are using ChatGPT. Less people are using Stack Overflow or websites. They're using tools, Gen AI tools, which is great. The problem is, apparently they did a study. There's a 400% decrease in quality versus copy and paste, and we all talked about the copy and paste errors in software coding. Now it's worse than that. So that's a big problem. So we've looked at some of these tools internally, and a lot of the tools from Microsoft, we found the quality is terrible. We stopped using them. I don't want to pick on them, but we actually looked at Copilot and we stopped using it. The quality was terrible. It was really bad. So the
Can we
problem
get
is
a
that
quote from you on that?
we're actually using a combination of Q and Gemini. So we use Google and we use AWS right now. But we
Okay.
did try it, and we found that the other two platforms that I mentioned are much better. Um, it was our CTO, not me, but that was his quote. So you can quote me quoting him. There you go. A meta quote. And the other thing we found is that on the testing side of things, whereas developers are using it on the testing side, 26% are using Gen AI in testing, so 74% are not. And I suspect they're not using a lot of it either. So testers are really lagging behind. And so now you have the problem of testing is the bottleneck. Developers are doing more of it and they're worse at it. How are we going to test it all? So the solution to that is in the testing community, we do a lot of testing conferences. Then the holy grail of testing is, can I do testing using, and I'm going to show you, let me just go back a second. This is our automation tool. And what they want to be able to do is, how do I test using natural language? Because, and I'll show you we've got two examples of this. So the first thing they want to do is, if I could take my test case that looks like this, I want to be able to give a computer that and have it do the testing for me rather than me doing it. And what we do now, today, what we do is a human takes this and they translate it into testing code. They write Selenium scripts or Cypress or Playwright, and they have to try and test an application, and that can take weeks and weeks to write the code. So that's always the problem with automated testing is it might save you 90% of your time when you've written the thing, but it takes you 200% more time to create the thing in the first place. So if your application is stable, it takes you several days to write the automation script, and now what took days to run takes hours to run. But if you change the application and it breaks, you've got to rewrite your script. And so we end up with negative return on investment. You spend more time writing and rewriting your scripts than the time you would have saved automating. That's always been kind of the problem with automated testing. It's been the holy grail, but it just hasn't really delivered often because of that. You spend more time fixing it than benefiting from it. So the cool part would be, could I take this, which is the description of the test, and automate it? So this is our automation tool. Previously with our automation tool, you would have to go in here and you would, so this is the web page we're going to be testing. It's a fake application. I mean, it works, but it's a sample app we have just for testing with. It's a simple web application. You log in, you create books, create authors, and do stuff. So you could go in, traditionally you could go in, you could build a test case. You would go in here, and these objects are all the things on the page. So instead of saying, I'm going to click on the login button, I'm going to click on this button, click on that button, I would go in here and I can use the record feature, and I as a human can record through it. I can build a test case and I can drag and drop. So it's already a bit faster than a coded like a Playwright or a Selenium. So this is an auto tool that's codeless test automation, but there's no AI in it. It's just me as a user building a test case using drag and drop. Now, the AI which is the new feature we added, is really cool. It's right here. And this is using currently the Claude 3.5 Sonnet version 2, which was released recently. And this also would work with some of the other Claude models too. What this will do is I can talk to this computer in natural language. So I'm going to give it a human readable. It's a bit simpler than that one I showed you with the booking a ticket. But I want to log into this website with this URL with a login and password. And I want it to wait 5 seconds, and I want then log out. So that's human readable. That's just English. That's not computer code. So I do that. What it's doing behind the scenes is this agent, which is connecting to Claude, it's going out there and it's basically looking at all the objects on the page that we've seen, because we've looked at the application, we registered them all, and it's basically come up with a test script. Now, so this is now, again, one level more efficient. I can then go into the system and say, I want to take this test script and I want to just use it. So I can go to my test scripts and I'll just put it at the end. So I go here and I say apply, and I can say put it at the end, and it will apply right here, and it will generate what you see here, this. So it generates a set of steps for you. So whereas instead of me creating it, it's created the test script. So this is basically an assistant, we think of it as like a test intern that can take your 1 line or 2 lines of English and it will turn it into a functioning test. This still does rely, though, ahead of time on you having grabbed all the UI elements on the page. Like, for example, if I go to the login page, there's a login button and a password. Ahead of time, I had to go in here and I had to record, and I had to basically touch each of those objects once, and it then builds a reference to them, and then it uses the technology way to find them. And that's the way test automation has worked. It's basically you record a reference to that item on the page, and then when you play the test back, it runs. So the AI is really good here because what it's doing is it's taking my English and turning it into the right script for me. And the benefit would be is if my application was to change in some way, maybe the login button becomes renamed to submit. I don't have to necessarily rewrite my script. I can just have the AI regenerate it for me, and it will rebuild my script for me. So that's kind of the first thing it could do is it can write my test for me, and I can edit it and then I'll use it. The second thing it can do, which is quite useful, is I want to generate test data. I want to log into this app and I want to iterate through and create a bunch of test data to create books multiple times. So in the old days, I would go into like a spreadsheet or a Google Doc or Google Sheet, and I would go in and create all these list of books. So how did I do that? Well, I didn't use that. I actually used the AI. So using the AI, I can say, I've got what I did before. I could go in here and say, please generate a table of books. And I know I need these different data fields for this test to work. I need the table of books with the name, the author, and the genre of the book. And it's going to give me, I think it gives me about 5 to 10 books, depending on how the AI feels that day. So it's going to give me some. We'll see. There we go. And I can then take those books and I can then apply them into my current tests, which is what I did here. And if I go in here, I could say apply. Where is it gone? There's apply. And I say append, and it puts them right there. So it's creating my test data. Now, it created about 7 or 8 books. I don't have any control of those books. They're rather random selection. So the great thing with AI is you can just, it's an interactive conversation. I could say, generate more books, but only those published in the last 10 years. Sorry, can't spell. Published in the last 10 years. So as a test assistant, 10 years, you can have, you can refine the data set and then it'll create hopefully the right kind of books like that. So this is basically as a test assistant, this is taking my English natural language test case and it's turning it like that into tested. Now, for example, if this was a medical system, you don't want to do a PHI, you might say, generate a bunch of patients and symptoms, and I only want these kinds of I want their name, social security number, which is fake. I want their medical history, and you can build out a data set that's completely synthetic. And the great thing there is this is really good when you want to run an application through boundary conditions, because you can say something like, oh, make sure you try at least one person who's got a name of 10,000 characters. Make sure one name's got at least some French characters or Arabic characters. So it's for test data. When you're testing a system, it's really powerful because you can create test data that really stretches the system and make sure that it's gonna you can test all the weird cases that will happen in real life, because there will be. Suppose the person has no last name. Things like that. I mean, they're just the first name. Make your test for that. So anyway, the test data system is really cool. Then so that's like the next level of AI is, well, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to maintain this test script? Because this is kind of clunky, right? Well, the next level of automation is I can actually write my test in natural language, and then the system will infer the test script on the fly. So this is my same test, and it's natural language, and I can go in here, and it will actually show me the test it generates on the fly, and that way I can maintain these 3 steps here as the source of truth for my testing. I don't have to deal with test scripts. That's my test. When I run this test, it interprets this on the fly, turns it behind the scenes. You're just previewing it here, sees the code, and then runs it. And if you're curious, does this actually work? You can hit the play button. If I just make sure the app's ready, I'll go back here, show you it working. So I've done a lot of talking. If I hit the play button, it hopefully should actually play that and play it back. We'll see. So it's now doing an automatic play. My hands are not, no hands, see, no hands. It's logging in and it's going to wait 5 seconds and log out. So the AI has written in natural language and it's turned it into a test. So this is pretty amazing. What would take me as a test automation engineer, probably several hours, will take minutes, maybe less. Now, there's still one problem though. The problem is I had to do this work up front to identify all the UI user ID elements.
Yeah.
And that's the holy grail of testing is, what if I don't need that? What if I could have the AI look at this page, or a page, it's a different app I have, but a page like this, and what if it could just infer from looking at it what needs to be tested? And there's no objects on the page, there's no work done ahead of time. I can give it an application it's never seen before, and it can infer from looking at the app graphically. And then what we found is the latest version of Claude, only this can do it, 3.5 Sonnet version 2. It's the only AI model in the world right now. It's a large action model that can do what I'm going to show you next. None of the other models, any of the other vendors can do it, as far as I know. And we have tried with a bunch of tools to compare. Only Claude, and this is running on Bedrock, can do this. It is literally groundbreaking. What this will do is it can now run a test from an application it's never seen before, just from English. So I want to show you that example. It's a robot example, we call it. And if I go here, it's very cool. Hopefully it'll work. So in this example, I've got this new AI robot, and all I'm telling it is go to this URL. I set the page size to a certain size, and I say log in as this user, and I want to edit a book and change the genre from A to B. And if you look at this test, it looks like the other one, but there's no objects, there's no UI elements, there's nothing. I literally just type this. There's nothing else behind the scenes. It is simply looking at the English language, going to the web page, and the AI is able to snapshot the screen, the graphics, and it can infer how to test it dynamically from its understanding of what an application is, what a web browser is. It's amazing. So if I play this one, make sure I've got the right tab. There it is, and it hopefully will work. It worked before, but you never know in these demos. So let's go and see. It does have to change the app. There, go to this one. So now it's going to be a bit slower. Now it's going to be slower because it's using AI in real time to actually do the inferring, whereas the other one had used AI to create a test script and then runs the test script. So the disadvantage right now is it's slower. But as these models get faster, this is only going to get faster. It's not much slower. The great thing here is this doesn't have to know about my application's objects and page design. It's looking like me as a user, and it's replicating the user experience. It's figuring out. So we
It knows
call
to
this
go to the book section now. It'll
It
know.
does. It does. It should do. It does. And I don't know how does it do that, because we didn't tell it that, right?
Yeah, we just told it to change the red. Wow.
This is incredible stuff. This is what we call autonomous testing. Unfortunately, this is probably going to change the entire testing industry, which we're in, overnight. So, you know, and it's going to change it. Like, I didn't tell it a drop down, right? I didn't say it's a drop down. I just said change it. I didn't say it's a drop down. It's a drop down. I don't know how it knows. It knows. This is literally, this is like 3 days ago. We finally had the breakthrough on this. So you're getting
I
this.
would say, so speaking from the ML side of things,
Yep.
one of the main feedbacks that I get, and I'm not gonna pick on any company in particular,
Right.
but one of the main feedbacks we get about generative AI as a whole, like
Yep.
since September 2022, I would say is, oh, that's great. You know, it's cool that it can tell me, can it do it? Like, it's great to have a consultant, but hey, can we get someone that can do it?
Yeah.
There's plenty of people that know how to change oil. There's very few people that will do it when you tell them to do it.
Right.
When the car breaks down, well, maybe not break down for an oil change, but
Right.
when the car needs an oil change, how many people are going to do it? So this is a direct and from, I forgot what it's called, from Anthropic. The thing that's testing right now to be able to kind of like, the thing that takes 16 billion tokens per millisecond to take over your computer and start doing certain applications, certain things for you. But something like this is like a direct response to, hey, I told you how to do it. If you don't want to do it, you can have this do it for you.
Well, I haven't seen my Amazon bill yet, so this in all seriousness, I think we're using that. We're using the Anthropic. This is the Anthropic Claude 3.5 Sonnet V2
Okay,
model. So I think we're using
there
that.
we go. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, so it's expensive and it's slow, but not so much Moore's law, but the equivalent. We're going to get there. The speed is going to get better, and it's pretty fast already. The cost is still a factor. That's why I say we're on this transition point where if you look at the AI I showed you a minute earlier, where it had the test script and it was the assistant, that's very affordable, and that takes you from natural language to a script that runs implicitly or explicitly, and it still relies on doing some of the page objects, some of the identifying UI elements the old-fashioned way, and that's much cheaper and much easier to start with. But as the costs go down, which they're going to go down, inevitably this is the future we're seeing. Now, maybe it's not yet affordable for every team or every company, but the future is this is going to be the way, because as you said, don't just tell me what to do it for me, because the biggest problem is if my application is changing, a customer says, we want to be customer obsessed. A customer says, my users get very confused. They don't see that create new book, it's too small, or the books it's too faded. Could we have a nice button instead? If you make that a button, not a link, every automated test you have will probably break. Anyone who's done testing will know, like, oh my God, don't change it, don't make it a button. Make it look like a button, but don't make it a button, because or oh, this is really confusing. This search button, shouldn't this be over here? Move it somewhere else, change it. You're going to break all your tests. The great thing with this is the AI is interpreting like a human, and it will adapt to that on the fly. It doesn't need to be retold how to do its job. And so this is going to reduce the cost the business cost of testing, because even if it uses a lot of tokens, if you're taking a testing team of 10 and you replace it with people who are going to do test validation, reviewing the results, making sure that we're covering everything, it's again, it's that left brain, right brain. A lot of the work of just writing large amounts of Selenium testing scripts in your favorite language is probably going away, is being replaced by someone who's going to be looking at this going, what is it missing? Like, this is obviously the happy path test. Well, what is the non-happy path test? What are the failure cases? This is a very simple example. And so the AI I showed you earlier can do some of that with the generation of test scenarios and stuff, but it didn't find everything, and that's going to still need humans. So it's really the human machine team is just going to be able to do so much more. And as we're relying on software so much more, that's only a good thing, right? I mean, that's how I see it.
Yeah, and in my, well, I'm not gonna say this. I'm gonna say this 100% from a personal opinion perspective. The number one customer use case that I've seen of, oh, that's great that it can tell me what to do, but I want it to do it, updating documentation. That
Right.
is by far, I think, across the board what people don't want to do. But having something that can say, hey, go read through this now, okay, let's say you tell it every week, Monday 2 a.m. you run maintenance, and you wanted to check on set at 7 a.m. what changed. Go look at every single possible screenshot. Go match token for token. It's not going to be cheap, but go match exactly what you did last week and make whatever changes that you see, push it to the documentation, and then have someone review it and read through it and say, okay, this makes sense, that makes sense.
Right.
Having that, like, it's not going to replace the workflow, but it will make sure that certain parts of the workflow that may not necessarily be the most business driven decisions possible. It is a lot of maintenance, a lot of, like, you know, it
Right. And
has to get done tasks.
yeah, and you find me a developer or a tester who really loves, like, when we were a small company, as I mentioned, I started coming 18 years ago. I was the only coder. I was the coder, the CEO. I was everything. And did I love updating the documentation with the new screenshots when we added a new feature? I loved adding that new feature because the customers were so happy to get that new feature. But I knew they needed the documentation. Did I really like open up that markdown file and putting a new screenshot in and replacing? Oh my goodness, it is mind numbing, and we make mistakes. I mean, AI is really good at these. I mean, I've got, what was say the last year AI could do all this. Now the new AI can do a lot more, but AI is really good at those tasks. We use it right now actually to do a lot of our documentation, editing and writing. We have something called
Oh
SpiraDocs.
yeah.
It's a markdown file with all our documentation, and our developers are really good at documenting, like, in the Turtles way, what changed. We use the AI to make it much more end user readable, a little bit more descriptive, and everyone loves that. And also other languages, and we have some non-native English speakers who do some of the development, and most of our documentation is in English, and some of the languages too. So it's really good for these kind of use cases too. Um, and obviously marketing we have tons of uses for it as well. But we're using AI a lot as a company. But the main use cases, I think, really for our platform, what we're selling and going to market with, with AWS, are taking that one user story, that one line of user story. We can take that and we can build out your entire project plan. All the project manager stuff is really mind numbing and time consuming, and really this helps speed that up. And then on the testing side, first of all, doing the manual test, doing the BD, but then this next level of automation is taking away the grind of writing automation scripts. You find a test automation engineer who likes going and finding XPath or CSS or pulling their hair out. I mean, it's not the most fun work, and it isn't the best use of someone. So this is really using a robot to do what robots are really good at.
Oh,
Finding mistakes
also,
and fixing
and
it.
as it's going through changes, even so, like the tried and true, like non-Gen AI use cases, finding trends. Hey, you've been doing these changes over the last 3 months. I'm noticing a trend towards break fixing. Maybe you should pause updates for 2 weeks and reevaluate everything. Let's go through all the possible bugs. It
Right.
sounds like, I mean, judging from the immediate mouse changes, it sounds like I hit a possible segue into another section in your demo.
Right, right. And in terms of some of the things, well, some of the things that we're doing today, most of the Gen AI functionality I've shown you, that what we're looking at doing in the future is around exactly what you said, is we have all this great data in our system right now, and we've got these great dashboards. But what we want to be able to do is, and some of the things we're looking at is, how do we improve the reporting into the predictions? So, for example, we have all these requirements in our system. So we have all these requirements. There's tons and tons for my demos and examples that we have. All these test cases that we see here, they connect to sorry, these requirements connect to test cases, and that test case connects to tasks, and then that task connects to code. So let's look at some. So in the system we have links to the builds. So you've got a build pipeline, and that build pipeline's got code, and that code was developed to implement this new screen. Well, in our tool we have visibility into these are the 3 lines of code, Java code, that you had to change to implement that screen. And if you go to the system, you can track the changes, either this view or that view. So we have this amazing data set in Spira right now, which covers everything from requirements analysis to product development to program management to coding to testing, risk management. But what we're not doing today yet is using that to do forward-looking trend analysis, and that's where we want to go. And we've been working with the AWS team actually, as we did an innovation exercise and I'll give a shout out to Apollo and from our account management team. We did one of those working backwards sessions, and the output of that was a what's it called? Project Insight, we're calling it, and it's just a project name, and that's going to be using the data in Spira and then using that and putting it into like a data lake and doing more data. And I'm not an expert on this side of things, so I'm going to putting it into basically a place where we can do um, analytics on it and more deep machine learning. So not Gen AI, but more your traditional AI, machine learning, data analytics, which can look for those trends. Because what we really want is a client to say, not that this project is late. Wouldn't it be great if we could tell them, there's a major issue we see coming up in a week's time because you've got this code in production, and we've seen this developer, perhaps their code has these problems historically, and maybe this is going to happen. So those are the kind of use cases we want to work on. So if I go back to the presentation a second, some of the things we're going to be doing in the future. So I'm going to skip it. I've shown you all the app stuff. So some of the stuff we're looking at in the future. I'm just going to slideshow. Where's the slideshow? There we go. It is. Hold on. Oh, it's PowerPoint crashed on me. Okay. That's weird. It's not. Oh, I think I used up too much memory using the automation. So let me shut the automation tool down. I think PowerPoint may have run out of memory. Let me just I'm going to reopen the presentation a second. Hold on. Gen AI can be memory intensive. So let me reopen my presentation. And there we go. Yeah, that's crazy. So the other things we're looking at are using some of that data to do predictive analytics in the system. So the first use case we're looking at is is basically code analysis to optimize tests. So one of the challenges that people have in terms of testing is tests take a long time. Even if we automate all these tests, and you saw that one we just did, it takes time to do that. And you may have 1,000 test cases you run every single time you deploy code. Now, when you change a line of code, in many cases, you're not touching the whole code base. You're just touching a certain piece of the code base. Now, the problem is that we then run everything because we're just not sure. So we're working on a tool right now which would help you analyze the code base, all the commits that are done by the developers, and look at historically when this code changed in the past, what tests failed. And you start to build out a heuristic map between all the code and all the tests. So what the aim therefore, and there's a video you could watch that we recorded previously, which basically says take all these code commits that have been done in this last sprint, and let us figure out, because of these specific code changes, of my 1,000 tests, there's only 20 I have to run. Now, there are 20 that I have to run to really guarantee, to optimize covering that test. Now, I do that every single day in a sprint, but then when I get to the final release, I probably still want to do the larger test of 1,000. So it's not going to replace the 1,000 tests. All we're saying is, in the day-to-day, where time is precious, if you're writing code and pushing into production, or not production, pushing it into the pipeline, and you want to test that, you can optimize the tests that are being done. So you're not spending, 4 or 5 hours waiting for the build pipeline to finish because of all the tests. And that way it just speeds up. And if you look at manual tests, which it also works with, then you're saving a lot more time. So the idea here is test planning optimization based on historical fault analysis. So that's one use case of predictive analytics being able to help us optimize the tests. But that's just on the testing side. We see other things as well around risk management, looking at which tests reduce the overall risks in the system. We do it manually right now by assigning risk probabilities. We could do that. The other thing is, in the system, I use Gen AI to develop the set of risks of what could happen. But I didn't rank the risk. I didn't give them a probability or an impact score. I, as a human, can obviously guess at that, but the system could probably tell me what's the risk of cybersecurity of a cross-site scripting attack. It could look at the code base and say, well, we found some issues. It probably is a high risk. Or it could look at it and say no. So integrating with other data sets as well could be interesting. So we want to use the data we have and machine learning to really provide additional data to the user. Right now, we're giving you pretty dashboards that tell you what is the story today. We want to use the machine learning to be able to tell you 3 weeks from now what you should be worried about, because that's always what project managers care about. Is if I want to go to my boss and say, I'm really worried about these 3 things because we may have this coming up, how can I plan for that? How can I staff for that? And that turns us from basically just giving you data to giving you information, and that's really the benefit we can do with that. And our R&D team is working right now with our AWS account team to do that, do this analysis and figure out how to do some of this stuff. Any questions? That make sense?
Yeah, very cool. Especially the whole selective running of tests. That seems like a very interesting use case. Excited to see.
And the other one is also finding flaky tests for the same reason. The same analytics can be used to do both. And then the third use case, which is a new one we've been working on, it's another app we're building in, because our platform Spira has the ability to write apps inside the app. We call them SpiraApps. And we have our own marketplace where you can do that. So we're on the AWS marketplace, but you can buy apps in our platform as well, which add on to it, and then you can buy them all through AWS marketplace, which is really cool. But this particular app will allow you to do something which I mentioned at the beginning. If you remember that very first slide, which talked about the problems around quality, it said in that small little box, requirements are often wrong. And requirements often is the root cause of software products being in trouble. Now, if you're building a consumer application that's relatively well understood, this is maybe less of a problem, but maybe it's not. But if you're building a complicated, mission critical, critical infrastructure kind of application, the requirements are often much more prescriptive than a traditional user story. So it's something like, the cockpit altimeter should display the distance, things like that, or avionics. And so we're building this new assistant that will actually analyze the text of your requirement, and it will actually give you feedback on how to improve the text itself. So, for example, it says here we're using the word "it," so it's marked up my requirement, and it's flagged the fact that the word "it" is a very generic word, and I should probably use a noun like to display distance from the ground. So when the person building the system actually gets that, they've got a much higher quality understanding of what this functionality is. And that's a very simple example. This will actually do a detailed analysis of the entire requirement description. It also will look for requirements that conflict with each other. Maybe one requirement says display the distance from the ground in meters. Another one says display it in feet, which is right, which is wrong. I don't know. Maybe we need to do both. Maybe it's a mistake. So it's those kinds of requirements analysis that this will help. And we're working with a third-party company that is giving us some help in terms of the analytics. And this is another function we're going to be releasing into our platform, which is using AI to be able to help at the beginning of the process, really improve that requirements analysis and making sure that this is the highest quality before we get even into development and testing. So that's, I think, that's some of the functionality we have. The other thing I wanted to mention is, we've talked a lot, and this, people get very anxious. Like, I go to testing conferences, I go to Star East and Star West every year, and people get very, very worried about when they see some of these use cases, and especially that last one with the autonomous testing. What's my job prospects? What do I do? I mean, I'm a computer science major. I want to get into development. Is my job being done by AI? I'm a software tester. You know, I used to write Selenium scripts, or I'm a manual tester. Where are we headed? So one of the things I would say is, if you look at the history of mankind and technology, we always seem to have more work to do, not less. We in the factory floor, we made things by hand. Humans would sew and cut and do that kind of stuff, make fabrics. Now we have factories that make clothes, and for the most part, there seems to be more humans involved in more parts of the process uh, than before, and yet we've automated it. So I think what we're seeing is we're going to see a job shift. So for sure, if you really want to do the job that you would have seen advertised 3 years ago, that may well change. But certainly, if you think about it, a lot of the manual tests you talked about, documentation, writing Selenium scripts, unit testing. I mean, developers do a horrible job of unit testing, and I'm a developer, so I can say that. And originally, and we all like to write the happy path, call the function, pass the positive values, and it works. And okay, I'm done, commit it, and go home. AI is very good at saying test all the positive cases, the negative cases, which is boring, but it is very necessary. So a lot of the work that we do is kind of boring and kind of tedious, copy and pasting from Stack Overflow, that sort of stuff. So AI is going to really help us think about the critical parts of the system. And one of the things that's really critical on the testing side and the planning side is really, is the system fit for purpose? Because when we think about testing and the requirements, we often think about testing as, did it work? So imagine you built an application that works, but if it's unusable, did it really work? I mean, I'm thinking back to the great Steve Jobs presentation when the first iPhone came out, and that was a massive leap forward. And you look at some of the older devices that were on the market prior to that. I mean, they were barely usable. My mother couldn't use them. My mother got her first iPhone, and for the first time ever, could actually figure out how to use it. It's amazing. So we think about fit for purpose, usability, performance, the human factors, ergonomics, accessibility. There's so many things that make a system fit for purpose that, just it working is like just the table stakes. And now, if we can have computers really get that first level of foundation, fit for purpose is really the higher bar we should be striving for. And if you're a small company that's going to build a new revolutionary medical device or software system, you don't have the resources before to do all of this other stuff. If you can get the system out to the market and it works for most of the time, you're happy. But imagine that could be done so easily. But now you can make it accessible for people with disabilities. Now you can make it super easy to use. Now you can make it, potentially help people, with lower budgets because it took less money to develop. Whatever it is, the AI is going to make your application better in this wider sense of fit for purpose, not just it works. So I think we're raising the bar on quality across the board. And I think because as I mentioned at the beginning, we're using software so much more for things that we never did before. I mean, I was there during the dot-com bust. At that time, the internet was mostly people going online or doing e-commerce kind of application. It was mostly go to a web page and you could do something. And if it didn't work, you could pick up the phone and call a call center. In the same way that in 2000, we had some early websites that you could maybe do things, but there was always fallback methods. Well, now there are no payphones. You go to your local parking garage, the meters have all gone. It's all apps. So apps are everything. And if that app doesn't work, nothing works. So as I said, the stakes are getting higher. And so the fact that we have this AI human team to do testing, I think is a really good thing because it's raising the bar for the apps we're building for people. So I think in the end we'll have just as many developers, just as many testers. They'll do different things, maybe even more actually. But we'll have much better software and it will do much more important things because we can now trust it to do more important things because it's much more reliable. And the analogy that we often use is people often think about filmmaking. When Gen AI first came around, you may have seen some of those demos online where you could upload you could have it write a movie script. You could say, please write a movie script for I don't know, a cartoon, and it would give you a script. You could then take the script and go into a different AI, and you could say, create a video based on this. There was one with some guy who had like a balloon for a head walking around. It was kind of cool. Um, and then the reality was. First of all, the next question was the movie actually interesting? Probably no. It was interesting because it was AI generated, but you wouldn't have actually wanted to watch it. So someone has to go through and check that is it actually a fun movie? Do it, test screening audiences. Did they like it? Does it actually look real? Did people do crazy things like walk through walls? So there's tons of things, and video games which sort of film the same way. When we got some clients who are game manufacturers, and they have to do a lot of testing, like can you walk through a wall? Can you do non realistic things? The same thing in a movie. If you're going to use AI to do special effects, making sure that it looks real, because nothing dates quicker than bad CGI. So I think if you think about that analogy, people still need humans because if you remember the Game of Thrones, they had this coffee cup from Starbucks that made its way into the final print, and it went through all of the reviews and all the process, and we still missed that. So, if the analogy is software testing, we don't want that equivalent of a coffee cup getting through into production, because whereas in the movie we can just say, oh, that's funny. If that's a critical system that we're relying on, that probably isn't a good thing. So it's really important, I think, to have this human computer team working together to deliver a high quality system for customers and businesses and organizations around the world. So that's the slide. So what are your thoughts? Any comments? Any dissenting views from people or yourself? I haven't look at the comments.
Uh, I'll go first. What I really liked about your whole presentation is, first of all, you not only walk the walk, you also talk the talk. Especially that demo with just using prompt to be able to automate the whole testing. That seems like it's gonna really be the norm in the coming years. And having a prototype ready, I don't think I've seen anyone else. Like right now, most people are still doing chatbots, and here we are doing something very interesting. I also like the fact that you have a very clear vision of where you want to go. You have ideas for, incorporating traditional AI analytics, sort of using the data that you've already established and built up. I'm also excited to see your integrations with source code and how you can sort of predict what's going to happen, what's going to break before it breaks. Very exciting stuff. Please, if anyone has any chat questions, please, before we wrap up, would appreciate if you could put it in the chat. And Zohaib, if you have anything to add.
So this is more of like a looking out to the future sort of thing. in terms of, you mentioned guardrails, you mentioned things that you're doing and things that other people should be keeping in mind
Hmm.
moving forward. But how about when it comes to making advancements in a specific software, in a
Right.
specific industry? So let's
Hmm.
say, hey, you know what? I think X is honestly, it could be using a little revamp. It could definitely be getting a little makeover or do-over. What are
Hmm.
some things that a company should keep in mind when it comes to reevaluating the current circumstances? I'll give an example. I'll give like an actual example that I heard of a services company that does a lot of DevOps related deployments,
Yeah.
making sure that the CI/CD principles are taken care of. And they say, hey, you know what? The actual pipelines that are the best practices, we think that we can add just a few more things that can be automated in in an IAC, like a infrastructure as code, like a
Hmm.
cloud formation template.
Right.
Let's automate that. Let's do that. That's a
Right.
great advancement. If you can automate anything
Hmm.
for not that for A, for cheap, B, for an actual end customer,
Hmm.
but what's a good thought process for a customer to go through that?
I mean, the first thing I always want to understand is, first of all, any decision, I mean, whether it's that or others, is what's the business value? So in this case, because the biggest danger I see with any technology is people see, oh wow, there's a new type of pipeline or a new kind of automation. As a technologist, you're like, I want to use that now because it's going to be cool, right? Or better. Is it better? So the first thing I always say is you look at the business value. So first thing would be, why does the CTO, why does the business benefit from me doing this? Like, because you might say, well, because time is precious. So the first thing would be I could automate that with a new template that would speed up my pipeline. But let's say my pipeline is super fast, and guess what? The pipeline is not the bottleneck in our entire process. Whilst that's a good thing to do, you might want to do something that actually is the bottleneck. So the first thing would be business value. Business value should drive technology. So let's say the business says, you know what, that pipeline is the bottleneck. Everything is ready. This pipeline is the problem. It's so slow. So you check, you've got business value. That's going to give you executive buy-in, and it's going to give you business stakeholder buy-in, and it helps direct why you're doing it. Because the biggest danger is you start refactor. We do this. So we refactor, and you've got this great faster pipeline, and no one cares. And as you say, if no one cares, it's like the working backwards session we did at AWS. Like write the press release first, then the FAQ. Because if no one cares when they read the press release, then there's no point in it. So if the business exec or the CTO says, "I don't care about this pipeline," then let's not do it. So but assuming that's the case, and the next thing would be, thinking about the requirements for, what is this trying to do? What is the benefit for it? Then we document that. And then it would be really around, what are the bottlenecks in the pipeline? If there are certain steps we could automate, maybe we're using, I don't know what technology, maybe it's like a Jenkins pipeline, or maybe it's code build. What are the bottlenecks in the steps we want to automate? And then measure. First of all, measure the current baseline, measure each step, make sure we got that tracked, put together monitoring tools, and then look to then get your new version, compare that, and then do analysis. Because we've often found in our pipelines that what we think is the bottleneck isn't. So a really good, it's a terrible example because it's so sad. We had a problem where one of our application was really slow, and we did no idea why the startup was really slow. And we had no idea why. Why is it so slow? We did all this work on the pipeline, the unit test, the functional test, was it the pull from Git, was it the database build, all this stuff. The slowest thing turned out to be back in the day, we had to support various different mobile browsers back in the days of you don't remember. And we were checking the user agent strings. This is read bit techie here. And the user agent string, we had to check all these browser names. Like, is it Android? Is it Dolphin, Boat? All these browsers. We're using a regex. And we used a dynamic regex. The regex took a minute. And every time you opened a page, it called the regex. Every API call, it called the regex. So our pipeline was slow because we were calling a regex like 20,000 times, each which took, I guess, 10 seconds or something. So it was and stuff like that. So I would say measure, and measure before you start. Because the biggest problem is you automate something and you end up making it either slower, or you didn't automate the bottleneck. You automated
You're
the
reinventing the wheel sometimes
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. So I'm a big fan of measure, optimize, and then get feedback. Again, this does general principles. Now, from a usability, let's say you've got this great application and the users hate it. Everyone wants to, there's always that thing. How do we do that? Do we throw it away? Do we start again? So there's some things that I've heard. This is anecdotal, but AI can do some really cool things where some people now are doing, and you may be involved with these projects. They're migrating applications by requirement. So traditionally, I've got an old COBOL banking application and I want to move it to Java. So you basically port it line by line to Java, and now you've got not Java, you've got COBOL that looks like Java. It's brittle, and you go to a Java program and they're like, I can't. It's not maintainable. Probably the COBOL is more maintainable. So what you do now is they've got tools that will decompile effectively the COBOL into requirements, like we saw in Spira earlier, and then you forward generate requirements into Java. Now you get a modern Java app that looks like Java. So people are actually using requirements and natural language type requirements and things like that, BDD. They're using it as a way of doing system migrations using AI. And for the first time, you're actually getting modernization of some of these monolithic legacy apps that's being done in a way where the target is natural, as opposed to being this sort of quasi hybrid COBOL Java chimera that is terrible. So I think because of modernization, AI's got a lot of, this has nothing to do with us, but a lot of good use cases out there. I know that some people I know in the government sector have been doing it for some of these very large monolithic government apps that I can't talk about actually. It was he told me under confidence, but some major government apps that we use every year, once a year at a certain time of the year around April. Some of those apps are being modernized in this fashion. That's all I can say.
Also, I just want to say I was there to download the first cyanogen mod on the HTC HD2. I'm not that young,
Okay.
just pointing it out. I was still able to flash a couple ROMs, but yeah, that is
The
definitely
iPacks, there was the iPacks and
yeah.
all those, the HP iPack and oh my god.
Wow.
And there was that mobile Java or Oracle had that embedded database. You could run Oracle on a iPad. It was like
Oh my God, yeah. I was
Oracle.
I was old enough to do it. I was not old enough to know what I was doing. I'll say
Uh,
that.
yeah. I think a lot of us were in that boat around that time.
Well,
But yeah, this has been super helpful. If Bhavye, if you had any questions, if not, I wanted to thank Jessica and Adam for coming here and talking about it. It was certainly a lot of fun to learn about this.
yeah, definitely. It was an exciting episode. First of mine, like focusing on Gen AI. So I really appreciate all the demos and all the insights you gave, Adam. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And if anyone wants to contact us, obviously through the various channels on LinkedIn, Jessica and I are both on LinkedIn. See me at reInvent. Big plug. If you're at reInvent, just message me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat. Get a drink, coffee, whatever it is. I'd love to talk more about this stuff.
There's another interesting event coming up tomorrow. Do you care to share about that, Adam?
Oh, our test bowl.
The Inflectra Con?
Oh yeah, Jessica, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Tomorrow we're hosting our test bowl. We've done this live. This one's going to be one of our virtual ones. Please join us. I believe, is at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah.
You can find it on LinkedIn if you go to Inflectra and look for test bowl. But it's a great way to bring people together. You can come as a team. We have an app. We have people get in there and try to break it, find all the bugs, and the team or the person who finds the most bugs wins. So we'll have Adam often will play some music.
MC, yeah.
He MCs it.
We have music requests, and the winner gets Amazon gift cards.
Yep. It's
course.
fun. It's really fun. So come and check it out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. So thanks everyone for joining. Next week there'll be another exciting episode of Howdy Partner. Same time, same place. But excited to see you all again. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great chatting with you.
All right.